My dear friends, welcome aboard. Fasten your seatbelts as we soar through the skies of truth, faith, and understanding. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program takes off right now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. It is 6 p.m. Mountain Time on the 14th of April. Tomorrow's tax day, you guys. Do you have your taxes done?
Well, yes, I have my customary, extension file.
Oh, yeah. Always kick the can down the street to October, huh?
Especially when you get to be my age. I may not make it to October.
Well,
why would I want to go do all that work for nothing?
Yeah, that's so true.
Don't even talk to me about tax season. That is the industry that I work in, and I haven't slept for like 2 weeks. So
tell us about how you got here today.
Down to the wire. Yeah, I was on, my commuter train, which was half an hour late. I was riding the rails, zooming in, haven't eaten all day. Got my cup of tea. I'm holding
it for dinner. That's tea
my dinner.
That cup is for dinner.
That's how committed I am to the Mormon Newscast. That's right.
She's chewing the tea bags.
Well, I will just note, I am joined by my colleagues, Rebecca Biblioteca and Radio Free Mormon. I hope both of you are doing well.
Very well.
I'm doing fine. I'm just suddenly realizing that could be taken in a terrible way, and I hope nobody's doing that.
It could have. We're just not going to go there. Okay, we're just going to ignore 90% of the things you say.
Go somewhere and spank yourselves, then come back to the show.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, folks, we have a great show for you tonight. I'll just put up the things that we're going to go over. It's a large amount of topics that we're going over tonight. The church loses lawsuit with its own insurance providers. That'll be covered by Radio Free Mormon. Jodi Hildebrandt seeks to withdraw guilty plea. Bruce R. McConkie grandson pleads to CSA. Fairview McKinney Temple update and more. LDS Easter madness. Abortion isn't simple. Lori Vallow trial and the Nephi defense. And we'll finish off with Mormonism's most important theologian in the 20th century. So with that, Mr. Radio Free Mormon, would you mind taking us into this first story?
Thank you. LDS Church sues its own insurance providers to cover costs of massive child sexual abuse settlement in West Virginia. And I just found that somewhere on the internet, and I thought it was kind of funny, that picture. There's Murrow and I blasting off of the Salt Lake Temple. Oh, and here's the first, the clip is a news story about this. It will give you the basic parameters. I'm going to try and keep this quick, but I also want to let you know why it is that the court ruled the way they did when the court ruled against the LDS Church and for the insurance providers.
All right, let me put that up on the screen. Okay, here we go.
I'm Ben Winslow at the federal courthouse in Salt Lake City. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has lost a lawsuit it filed against its insurance providers over covering sex abuse settlements, and the ruling could have big implications.
If the right things would have been done in the first place, we wouldn't be here today talking.
Tom Stallings is among a group of people who sued the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over sexual abuse in West Virginia. The church settled with his family.
They were aware of it, but they just kept covering up and never did anything about it.
The church then sued its own insurance providers, demanding they cover the cost of the settlement. In a ruling handed down earlier this month, a federal judge in Salt Lake City ruled against the church, saying that once the church had knowledge that there was risk of abuse to church members, the church had a duty to act. The church had multiple opportunities to act and failed to do so. The judge went on to say the church's insurance companies don't have a duty to defend the faith and didn't breach any contracts by refusing to cover the costs of the settlements. The church tells Fox 13 News it is reviewing the court's ruling.
They're being called to account. They're having to take responsibility for their actions.
Judy Larson is with the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, a support group for victims of clergy abuse. She believes it's a big ruling that could have implications for future abuse cases.
Too many times there are rulings for the powerful, and the victims, the survivors, they're not powerful. All we have is our voice, and this is going to amplify the voice of survivors, for sure.
Stallings says he's glad to see the judge's ruling.
It's just heartbreaking that they care more about the money because they haven't one time called or reached out and say, how's your kids doing or anything, but yet they're out there fighting to get their money back. And wish they'd put that much care into, the victims.
Now, the church does have the option of appealing the judge's ruling to the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. At the federal courthouse in Salt Lake City, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
One of the reasons I wanted to play that was for those victims to speak out. And also that man at the end, I forget his name, obviously has an accent. He's from West Virginia, and he's someone who was victimized. And it was just very powerful to me when he said that the church is doing all of this stuff to get their money back, but they never even called or checked in on them to see how the kids were doing when this all was going on. All right. Do you want to say anything about that, Rebecca?
I was going to say one quick little thing that I came across from Floodlit, which, as we know, follows all of these cases. And they've been trying to reach out to some of these news stations and give just a little bit of clarifying information that might put it in more perspective. And they say, we're hoping that the news will let folks know that we revealed last month that the church spent over $27 million to defend its lawsuit in West Virginia. And then it paid $32 million to settle with the plaintiffs. So we're already dealing with that kind of money. And now they're going back in trying to say, oh, no, that wasn't us. You guys need to handle that. So Floodlit is amazing, everybody. Please support as you can, because they definitely get the details out there. And they even try to talk to the news and say you need to put more information out.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Rebecca. By the way, if we can take this off the screen for just a second, because this whole case actually ends up turning on not whether the LDS Church is true or not, or whether it's horrible or not, or whatever. It ends up turning on the definition of one word. And that one word is occurrence. That's what this whole thing is. And believe me, this ruling is very much against the church. And if those numbers are right, they're out $5 million. Okay. So of course they're going to appeal. But what I wanted to do is liken this to something that we all have. At least almost all of us have experience with, and that's car insurance. So you go out, you get car insurance, you get your policy, right? And lots of people are like me, they get the minimum that's required in the state, like 100,000/300,000, right? And those are the maxes. Hope I'm not speaking Greek to you. You understand, Rebecca, Bill? Okay, and I'm going to keep checking in with you on this, okay? Just to make sure, because this is going to get more detailed, and I'm getting worried that if we're not getting... Okay, good.
I'll only note that 16% of people are uninsured drivers on the road. Just FYI, it's a little bigger number than you might have thought.
That's a good point.
Did you just have that on the tip of your tongue, Bill?
It's a data point that I know. For a guy who knows lots of data points, there's one you can add to your repertoire.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's true, but
it is.
I'm sure that, anyway, Bill, I'm not trying to say anything bad about you. Here's where we become more like Mormonism Live, and I apologize. Whenever information comes into my head, it gets sorted out. And if it's something that's actually substantiated, then it goes into one pile. And hopefully that's the pile I want to remember. And if it's not substantiated, okay, or it's something someone tells me and they don't know where they got it from, right? They just remember it. Then it goes over here in another pile. So I'm not trying to diss on you at all by saying that.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll just add, the internet says 14%, so maybe it's gone down just a touch.
No, I already put it in that second pile. Now I got to get it out of there.
Yeah, now there you are.
Close. I'm impressed that you were 2 percentages, there. I'm still impressed with that.
Okay. All right, so here we go. Insurance policy for your car. It's a 100,000, 300,000 policy, right? And what that means is $100,000 per person who might be injured, right? It's liability. And 300,000 is for each occurrence or incident, right? Because those can be different if more than one person is injured. Now, you'll notice that even in your car insurance policy, you have the word occurrence or incident. They call it an incident in our at least in my insurance policy, but occurrence is the same word as incident. So let's say let's say you've got a deductible, right? And the deductible is $100. Now, for anybody out there who doesn't know, the deductible means that this is the amount, if there's a car wreck or something, that you agree that you are going to pay the first $100 out of your own pocket before the insurance kicks in to start covering things thereafter, according to whatever the terms are in the policy. But that's what a deductible is. So, and the higher the deductible, the lower the premium. We all know that. Now, here's the question, okay? Here's the question. So I'm driving along in my car and I hit somebody else's car, and it's kind of a fender bender, and they get out, you know, and their arm hurts a little bit. But I say, hey, here's the deal. Let me just give you $100 and we'll just call it good. We don't have to call the insurance companies. Is that good enough? And they sign off all the legal stuff. He goes away. He's happy. I'm happy. Everybody's happy, right? Because $100 is what I was going to have to pay out of pocket anyway. I don't even call my insurance, which is the point, right? Is to not have to report it to your insurance. I have never done this, by the way. This is purely hypothetical. Now, the second hypothetical, though, is I've got the same insurance policy with the same deductible, and I'm driving along, and I'm looking at, I don't know, something over here in the clouds in this beautiful day, and I run into the back of this car that is slowed down in front of me, and I pop it into two other cars. And the driver of each car has this, their arm hurts, okay? But I go to each of them and I say, here's $100 for you, sign off. Here's $100 for you. Here's $100 for you, sign off for you. Now, I turn around and I go to my insurance company and I say, this is what happened, okay? There was one incident and I paid $300. Now, I know you don't owe me $300 because there's a $100 deductible. What you owe me is $200. Does that make sense? And the insurance company says, I don't know, you think I'm stupid? That's not one occurrence. That's three occurrences. That's three occurrences. So for each occurrence, the deductible is $100, which means that you paid your deductible to the first person, second person, third person. You never even got over your deductible because it's three individual incidents with three individual people. Therefore, we don't owe you anything. And the question is, who's right? Because that's exactly what this whole case turns on. And it's kind of shocking, I know, sometimes that something so important can turn on something so small. It's like for want of the nail, the war was lost. But that's the case here. So let's go ahead and go through. Oh, by the way, I was writing it down for the church because all the numbers in this 42-page opinion, which I read today in preparation for this. And, you know, if you're doing that small clip for the news, you really can't get to what the issue was because it gets a little bit too complicated. But we have a little bit more time here. And what I was thinking was, if the church has a $100 million policy, because it's a big church, there's a lot of liability out there, and they have a deductible of $10 million. So up to $10 million, they will cover before the insurance. It's just like car insurance. Same thing, just bigger numbers, right? Up to $10 million, the church will indemnify itself. It'll pay out of its own pocket the $10 million, and then the insurance kicks in. And really what's going on here is that there were nine children who were victims with whom the church settled, and their parents. So there's a whole bunch of them. And what happened was is that the settlement amounts, even though we don't know how much they were, each individual settlement amount was less than the deductible. But put together, all nine of them, or 9 plus of them, they were way over the deductible. So just as in our car crash example, the same issue was at issue here, which is this one incident, which is what the church wants. The church wants the court to interpret the word occurrence in the policy as this was all just one, even though there's 9, but it was one person, and they say it's one person because They actually say because the church's negligence is the one unifying factor in all of these cases. And I have it from the opinion. We'll put it up here in a second. Because of that's the one unifying factor which makes them all one occurrence. That's what caused them all. And what the insurance companies argue, there are actually two of them, what the insurance companies argue and what the court ends up ruling is that no, these are each independent, separate incidents because, and this is where the church's negligence comes back to bite them in the ass, because the church knew about these as they were happening. The church was getting notified. They knew or should have known. And yet they continued to allow this guy's mother to advertise his babysitting service, these kinds of things, all sorts of things all along the way. Insomuch that the court ruled that because the church knew about it each time and they were getting notified, that was sufficient to convert each of the victims into an independent occurrence.
I was just doing some math, and
Yes.
if Floodlit is correct, and 32 million were paid out to the plaintiffs, and there are 9 of them, it's like 3.5 million. I mean, and I don't know if each one would get the same, but
no, they would not.
They would not. It would be different. So, but
Almost
you can
certainly.
kind of put that in your brain: 32 million and 9 plaintiffs, and somehow it's all divided up.
Right, and there are parents involved as well.
Right.
Who frequently they get less, but they get something. So let me go ahead and put this up here on the stage if I can. So this is the order, the 42-page order that was entered on April 3rd, 2025. And it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints against their insurance companies. Let me just say it was Judge Tina Campbell. I'm guessing T-E-N-A. She pronounces it Tina. I don't know if it's just an unusual spelling. That was my mom's name. Tina Campbell issues this opinion. So in 2018, the parties to the underlying litigation reached a settlement agreement. And I just thought this was interesting because here's a familiar name, email from Paul writing to David Humphreys. We've seen that name before as an attorney who goes out and negotiates for the church and settles, hopefully, cases of this sort. The church compensated 9 of the minor plaintiffs and their parents. See, tons of them. I mean, it's just a whole lot of people involved, and that's what causes this whole thing. The settlement amounts for the plaintiffs ranged from this much money to this much money. In total, the church paid this much money, a much longer black mark, by the way, to settle the plaintiff's claims. At a hearing on the motions for summary judgment, counsel for the church informed the court that the case represented the largest settlement ever paid by the church to sexual abuse victims, and that the loss was catastrophic for the church. Now, I know the last part is a lie, so I'm not sure if the first part is true. But by that I mean, obviously, it's not catastrophic for the church. You're just $200 billion. Give me a break. Talk about hyperbole. But I also don't know, maybe it is true that this case represents the largest settlement ever paid by the church to sexual abuse victims. I mean, that's more a statement of fact. The second one's a statement of opinion. And so I'm guessing maybe that's true. I mean, there are a lot of victims all wrapped up in this one offender who, well, we don't have to go back to the facts of that, but that should have been stopped so early before many of these children were abused by him. Now going to page 15 of the opinion. Under the church's interpretation of occurrence, okay? So this is where I show in the opinion what it was I was explaining to you before. Under the church's interpretation of occurrence, Mr. Jensen, that's the bad guy, that's the molester. Mr. Jensen is akin to a bad driver whom the church negligently hired and who injured multiple people in a single crash. But Mr. Jensen's years-long pattern of abuse of multiple children and the warnings the church received about that abuse is more analogous to a bad driver who was negligently allowed back on the road over and over despite repeated accidents. Yeah, believe it or not, there's no cases in Utah that deal with this specific issue in the context of child abuse cases. And also, this is a federal court, but they're supposed to apply. This case, at least, is supposed to apply Utah law and try and follow Utah law and come to the same decision that the Supreme Court of Utah would come to. The court therefore declines to adopt the church's argument that its negligence was one occurrence. Instead, the court finds that a separate occurrence arose every time Mr. Jensen abused separate children at separate times and in separate places. The interpretation of occurrence more accurately reflects the source of the church's loss under the policies. And here's the conclusion. Based on the, and you can see the Fox 13 water print. Water, is that what's a watermark on there? Conclusions. Based on the umbrella policies language, the underlying facts and relevant case law, the court predicts that the Utah Supreme Court, that's why they use that unusual language, because they're supposed to come to the same conclusion the Utah Supreme Court would come to. The court predicts that the Utah Supreme Court would hold that multiple occurrences arose from the underlying claims against the church. Multiple occurrences. Once the church had knowledge that Mr. Jensen posed a risk of abuse to church members, the church had a duty to its members to prevent the abuse. And here's where it comes back to bite them in a most unexpected way. The church had multiple opportunities to act and failed to do so. Accordingly, there was a distinct occurrence under the policies each time. Each time Mr. Jensen abused a child or pair of siblings. And because the church did not exhaust its retained limit for any of these occurrences, they're calling a retained limit, but it's like a deductible. Because the church did not exhaust its retained limit or deductible for any of these occurrences, the insurers had no duty to indemnify the church for any settlement payments. And then there's the next story. So let's talk about this for a second. Do you have any thoughts about that, Bill or Rebecca?
I'll only say to the analogy that you let the driver back out on the road and he just keeps getting into not accidents, but maliciously hitting his car into people and buildings and causing all kinds of trouble. If you stand by and let that happen, of course you should be responsible. And the church had plenty of warning, it seems like. They had plenty of opportunities to step in and at least at the very minimum reduce their liability. And we have all grown way too familiar on this side of things with a church that seems to not really want to take all the steps to stop sexual abuse in this religious community.
It's an irony that it comes back to bite them this way, because it has nothing to do with how much they paid out. It has nothing to do with how much their insurance coverage was. It all comes down to the policy deductible, whatever it was they called it, the deductible and the definition of an occurrence. So, I mean, I think it would be correct law that if you were driving along and you ran into a school bus full of nuns, that your maximum is still $300,000 per occurrence. That's all that the insurance company is on the hook to cover you for, to indemnify you for, right? Okay. Anything else, that's going to be your responsibility. Rebecca?
I just think it's really surprising to all of us to see a headline that says LDS Church loses. I mean, we haven't seen that headline for quite a while. And also to read farther in the article and hear things like they were responsible, they were negligent, they did not, notify, they did not take action. It's just so interesting to see that. And I did check a bunch of faithful outlets, what you would consider faithful outlets, and they posted the same thing. LDS Church loses, so they weren't really trying to spin it, because there's almost no way you can spin this. I mean, it is a loss. So very interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's amazing. So anyway, I had a good time reading it, and we'll see what happens on appeal. It's obvious they're going to appeal. Yeah. If it's $50 million, right, they're going to appeal it and see if they can get 2 out of 3 judges on a panel at the circuit court to agree with him. Okay, so is this next one? Oh, this is the this is about Jodi Hildebrandt and her motion to withdraw her guilty plea. We were going to cover that last week, but we went long. So Jodi Hildebrandt seeks to withdraw her guilty plea. Boom. I put this up here not only in a sense of irony to show her in her popular days, but also as a constant reminder to all of us that this is what she looked like. This was her persona, even when she was doing things that were horrible. All right. Looks can be deceiving. So the next one, the news clip, the video clip, Bill?
Yeah, I've got it. Yep, I think so.
Yeah, it is. There it is. And this has to do with her motion to withdraw a guilty plea. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. Not as much as I did about the first thing, I promise.
The case of Utah momfluencer turned convicted child abuser Ruby Franke back in the headlines. Her co-defendant and former family therapist Jodi Hildebrandt is now trying to withdraw her guilty plea. In a new court filing, Hildebrandt claims she didn't fully understand her rights when she admitted to abusing Franke's 2 youngest children. She also alleges ineffective counsel, due process violations, and even prosecutorial misconduct.
We weren't expecting this from Jodi. But I can't say that we're super surprised either. I'm super confident that the entry of her plea will hold up and that she won't be able to show that she knowingly and voluntarily didn't enter it.
Hildebrandt and Franke are both serving time in Utah State Prison.
There you go. It's kind of funny that Jodi Hildebrandt is the subject of the story, but I think it was her partner in crime who got all the FaceTime there. Oh, well, maybe it's a good thing for Jodi. I want to tell you a little bit about this, okay? About motions to, that it? Oh, I'm sorry. You're trying to do it at the same time I am, right, Bill?
You go ahead.
Okay. I'm
All right,
letting Jesus take the wheel.
There it is.
I'm letting Bill take the reel. All right. Now, you saw the district attorney, the prosecutor there, who's saying, yeah, I think it's going to stand up. It almost certainly will. She's not going to be able to withdraw her guilty plea. All right. Guilty pleas are not something that you enter into and then later on you go, oh, I changed my mind. Can I take that back, Your Honor? No, you can't. Unless you can meet the very high burden of showing that you did not make your guilty plea knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. And that means you have to know what it is you're doing. You know what your rights are. Know what you're giving up. All these things. And she has to show that in order to have a basis for a judge to withdraw her guilty plea. Now, if the judge withdraws her guilty plea, that doesn't mean she walks out the courthouse door. It means she goes back to square one and she's on trial. And she doesn't have the benefit of the deal, and they're going to send her away as long as they possibly can. Which is just one of the many reasons somebody should think twice before they do this. Because the worst thing that could happen for Jodi is for the judge to grant her motion. Then she'd be going away for life, I think. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this. Oh, here's a funny story. Look, there's me in the lower left-hand corner. And there's a former prosecutor in the upper left-hand corner. That's Ron. I won't tell you his name. He was a prosecutor at the time. He was kind of difficult to get along with. I'm sure he's a super guy, good human being. But when it came to defense attorneys, and I wasn't the only one. Okay, Ron, I love you. If you ever watch the show, you're a peach. He's now like a court commissioner or a judge somewhere in another county. So he's doing good. And this is the very courtroom where it happened. So after telling you that it's very difficult to get a guilty plea withdrawn, let me go to this next slide, by the way. Okay, the felony guilty plea. Bill, are you able to click on this link? And I'm not trying to, this would be a great April Fool's joke, but if you can click on that link, thank you. What you'll see here, it takes you to the forms section of the Washington Court's website. And this is a felony guilty plea form, which is 12 pages long. And if you can just scroll through those, okay, all of these things have to be reviewed by a defendant before entering a plea of guilty to a felony. gone over with their attorney, usually they're represented. And then if any of these things at that point, if they apply or you check them and then you initial them as the defendant to signify that you know that those special things apply to you, and you can keep going down a little bit faster, Bill. I know it's very long, but yeah, it keeps going, and it gets longer all the time, right? And here's all the signatures. There's the defendant. By the way, you can't read the language, and that's okay. But what it says is, of course, you know, that I, the defendant, I'm saying, yeah, I went over this with my attorney, had it explained to me. I understand everything that's in this document, and I understand the rights I'm waiving, blah, 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 you know, everything. And my attorney, and I have no further questions of the court. And my attorney's explained everything to me, and I don't have any questions for my attorney. And it all gets signed off. Now, that isn't enough. After all of that, the defendant appears in front of the judge to formally enter the guilty plea. And then the guilty plea is entered, and then the judge goes over almost like half of this stuff out loud. You know, is this your signature on this document? Do you know that you're giving up this right? Do you know that you're giving up this right? Do you know that you're giving? Well, it's in the document, but he's going over it again. Why? Because they want to make their guilty pleas ironclad from attack by people like Jodi Hildebrandt, who get a wild hair and say, hey, I want to take that back now. I changed my mind. So it is very unlikely that she will be able to. If anybody out there was concerned that that would be something that would happen, or if it did happen, that would be good for her, it would not be. So back to this other slide. If I can go to that here. Okay, so we're here. And this was quite a number of years ago. And there was another attorney who had entered. We won't say who this other attorney was, okay? He was another attorney. He was a defense attorney, right? And this client, we'll just say the client, had been represented by this other attorney who had entered a guilty plea to a felony. And then come to me later wanting me to make a motion to the court to withdraw that guilty plea. Well, I got the guilty plea, and knowing this attorney, I thought, you know, maybe there's a chance, because it has to be really rigid, and there's a lot of ways to goof it up. But that's why there are forms that are put together by the clerk of the court, Washington state clerk. You know, that's just, they're putting these all things together, and they are constitutional, and you can't get around them later. Okay. This other attorney didn't use one of those forms. He just used something that had a bunch of lines in it. It was a blank kind of form, and he just sort of filled it in with his handwriting. And there were at least 3 things that were fatally wrong with this. So, of course, I made a motion, filed it with the court to withdraw the guilty plea. And poor Ron, he's the prosecutor's on the other side. Okay, so we go in there, and there's all sorts of other hearings going on. And now we get to this one, and the judge, who was, of course, seated up there between the 2 flags, he says to Ron, he calls him by Mr. I'll say Mr. Ron. He says, he's looked at the briefing, and Mr. Ron is about ready to start arguing, right, to have the hearing. And I've never seen this before, but the judge just goes, Mr. Ron, just don't even bother. Don't even try. Because this guilty plea was so horrible that, of course, it's going to be withdrawn. And it was. And I'm not sure if that worked out as well as my client had hoped it would. So even there, even when you win, you can lose on motions to withdraw. All right, going now to the third story. And these are my 3 stories, okay? So I'll be done after this, and we'll turn it over to Rebecca and Bill. The Mormon, David McConkie, Mormon grandson of Bruce R. McConkie and former bishop, stake president, and prosecuting attorney, submits proposed guilty plea in Colorado. Below on the left, of course, that's Bruce R. And on the right, we have something from Floodlit about David George McConkie, was a former Mormon stake president, Mormon bishop, and deputy district attorney in Colorado, and paternal grandson of former Mormon apostle Bruce R. McConkie. I'm sorry, I keep shaking my head. Maybe I'm getting jaded as far as being Mormon bishops and Mormon stake presidents, but a former prosecuting attorney? All of that together is blowing my mind. He was arrested in 2023 and charged with felony sexual assault on a child by someone in a position of trust. In April 2025, proposed a plea deal to avoid prison time. And let's go ahead and let's go to this next thing, okay? I'm going to go back a couple years, a year and a half, to September 22nd, 2023, when he was arrested. There's some facts in this story that are not in the later story. And this one is headlined, Arrest Papers Obtained for Former Colorado Deputy District Attorney Accused of Child Sexual Assault. They apparently got the arrest papers, but they're not going to disclose them. They'll just talk about what's in them. Colorado Springs, 11 News obtained a redacted copy of the arrest papers for David McConkie on Friday, which detail the allegations against the former deputy district attorney for El Paso and Teller counties. David McConkie is charged with sexual assault on a child by one in a position of trust with a pattern of abuse, a felony. The lawyer who was defending McConkie as of September 15th, remember this is 2023, Joshua Tolini, now tells 11 News he no longer represents McConkie. Tolini would not comment on why he is no longer working on McConkie's case and says he filed a motion to seal McConkie's arrest affidavit in mid-September. Tolini provided a copy of the motion, but 11 News had already received the redacted arrest affidavit through a standard records request with El Paso County Courts. The arrest papers detail accusations of assault from one victim over several years, from infancy lasting at least until that victim was a preteen. Now, all those details point to one thing to me, and I'm not going to say what it is, but if you follow along the same way, then you're probably coming to the same conclusion. This September 2023 article continues. According to the arrest affidavit, the victim told investigators about repeated inappropriate touching by McConkie, which persisted at times when the victim says they asked him to stop. The same documents state the victim told investigators some of the abuse happened when they would sleep next to McConkie up until the age of 11 or 12. Same comment as before. Also mentioned in the same papers, the victim reported forceful kissing and hugging by McConkie. One of the people interviewed by investigators and mentioned in the arrest affidavit has ties to a church. It's the LDS Church. Not sure why they put a church, but I think that the reason is that the reporting here is focusing on his being a prior prosecutor as opposed to his church affiliation in this article, which is Colorado Springs and local. So one of the people interviewed by investigators and mentioned in the arrest affidavit has ties to a church. According to the documents, that person told investigators McConkie allegedly confessed in 2008. That person told investigators McConkie allegedly confessed in 2008, and that it was normal for members of the church to confess to wrongdoings. Remember, this is 2023. This is being written. He was arrested in 2023. That's 15 years after 2008, after this alleged confession. McConkie reportedly said on a recorded phone call, some of the actions he's accused of were accidental. Never heard that one before. Again, this is all according to arrest papers. McConkie served as deputy district attorney in Colorado's 4th Judicial District from 2008 to 2011. Remember 2008 when he allegedly confessed. He went on to private practice, but the firm he was with told us they recently cut ties with McConkie. And now we come up to the present. Former Colorado prosecutor admits to attempted child sex assault in plea agreement papers. Plea agreement for former deputy DA admits to inappropriate touching 10 to 11-year-old girl, plans to plead guilty to lesser charge of attempt, asking for 5 years probation, likely will register as a sex offender. A lot of this seems cloaked in mystery, but unless Colorado is really, really way different than any place else, what this would be an agreed recommendation. This is a deal that's been struck with the prosecutor, right? I mean, you can't go in there and say, as a defendant, I'm going to plead to a reduced charge. Only the prosecutor has power to reduce the charge. The judge might, in certain circumstances, but the prosecutor is the one who has the power to charge and to dismiss and to amend charges. So only the prosecutor could do this. This is an agreed deal that he's struck with the prosecutor. Now, just because it's an agreed deal doesn't mean the judge will follow it, but 99 times out of 100, the judge is going to follow it because it's an agreed deal. And the idea being that, well, the judge doesn't know the case as well as the attorneys. I know my case inside and out. The prosecutor knows her case inside, maybe not inside and out, but they know it well. And we talk about things, and we talk about the strengths of the case from each side, the weaknesses of the case from each side, potential legal issues, and we come up with a deal. All right. Judge doesn't have any idea about that. He doesn't have the police reports in his file. He hasn't talked about the case. He can't talk about the case with us, except in court. So 99 times out of 100, the judge is going to accept and follow an agreed recommendation between the parties. That's why. Okay, so likely he'll register as a sex offender. And here is from April 11th by Melissa Henry. Colorado Springs, a former deputy district attorney in the Pikes Peak region, could serve no prison time after negotiating a plea deal in a child sex assault case. Now, I think that they have to mean that the agreement is no jail time. And the could is only that the judge has to, sanction the deal and go along with it. In 2023, David McConkie was charged with sexual assault on a child by one in a position of trust. According to his arrest papers, McConkie confessed to a church member in 2008. Sounds like a bishop. The allegations of abuse entailed multiple incidents spanning several years. He entered a not guilty plea in February 2024. McConkie, I'm wondering if that's 2024. McConkie was a prosecutor for El Paso and Teller County courts, and I'm guessing those are both counties in Colorado, from 2008 to 2011. He was working as a private practice attorney in Colorado Springs up until the law firm he was with cut ties with McConkie around the time of his arrest. On Friday, 11 News obtained a plea agreement filed April 4th. And once again, they're going to share it with us just like they shared those other papers. In the court papers, McConkie agrees to plead guilty to one count of criminal attempt to commit sexual assault on a child, a lesser charge than what he originally faced. Of course, that's why it's called a plea deal. McConkie admits to inappropriately touching a 10 to 11-year-old girl around 2014 in the plea agreement. 11 News is choosing not to publish the plea agreement out of respect for the victim, although they could have just redacted her name. In fact, in most plea agreements, names are redacted and initials only are used. But maybe there was so much factual information in it that it would make it obvious who she was. I don't know. However, there is a portion where McConkie summarizes what he is confessing to, where he writes in part, quote, "I admit that I could have removed my hands sooner." End of quote, referring to the inappropriate touching. Yeah. Okay, the only reason I'm looking askance at that line is because I would not have had him include that line, because that kind of line is the kind of line that's going to get a judge really pissed off. We'll see what happens at his sentencing. In July is when it's set, if it will piss the judge off or not. If a judge accepts the plea agreement, McConkie could serve 5 years of supervised probation and no prison time. He also would be required to register as a sex offender, but can ask to remove his name from the sex offender registry once 10 years pass from completing probation. It'd be 15 years. The district attorney's office provided the below comment when asked whether or not McConkie's past employment there has any impact on the case. He's past employment. Oh, he's being prosecuted by the same district attorney's office where he worked before, apparently. The district attorney's office provided the below comment when asked whether or not McConkie's past employment there has any impact on the case, and you could almost tell me what they're going to say. Here it is. No person is given special treatment by our office in any circumstance. Any plea agreement offered by this office is made only after careful consideration of the evidence, the case's likely success at trial, its impact on victims, and importantly, input from victims. Kate Singh, Chief Communications Officer, I've got no idea why they are prosecuting this case and why they did not bring in a conflict prosecutor. A judge can choose to accept or deny the plea agreement. If a judge denies it, McConkie can go to trial. McConkie sentencing is set for July according to court records. All right. So there is the third and final of my stories tonight. Any comments before we move on?
Just so many headlines, right? That implicate the church. Just headline after headline. It's very interesting.
And about half of them tend to be child sex abuse.
Yep. We don't even cover all of them here because we've talked about before. RFM could be all he talked about.
Yeah. And not something I would want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's my stories, and I'll turn it back to you, Bill.
All right, Rebecca, I believe you are next with the next story.
I think I might be up with some Fairview updates. Yeah, and I always get breaking news when I'm on that commuter train, and I can't make slides very well on my phone. These don't look as pretty, but I just threw them up there because it is breaking news. This is the letter that went out from the Planning and Zoning Committee in Fairview, letting everybody know, because they're required to notify that, hey, an application has been submitted, and we're going to have this meeting, and everybody show up, give your input. So you have the letter there, and then you have a drawing of the grounds. If you were to scroll in, there's all kinds of information, because we don't know much about what they're planning for lighting or sewage or traffic or landscaping, all those details that they had never really put in before. Now they're starting to fill in all those blanks. So this is
an especially large place for all the people who will want to show up.
Well, no, and we're going to talk about that. It's going to be kind of interesting. In the past, at their own expense, the town of Fairview has rented a hall and, fire, police, the kind of infrastructure that you need when you're going to have a massive crowd. And they didn't do this time. And as we're going to find out in 2 slides, they probably should have. So here is a rendering. We finally get to see it in color. The rendering of the McKinney, Texas temple. Still not sure if that's the actual name. I don't know about that. But earlier in their week, there had been kind of some talk that, is there another application of an even shorter temple? There had been some discussion that something else had been bet forward. Of course, I was very interested in that. But what it kind of turned out to be is just some discussion of the fact that if you see there, the tower goes to 78 feet. The tower, meaning like the architectural structure, the stone, and then the spire goes up the remainder up to 120. So to me, that's really good news, because that spire, is very thin, unless they put, as they said at that one meeting, is there going to be a golden dude on top? One of the residents asked that when he was talking to at one of the planning and zoning meetings. I don't think there's going to be a golden dude up there. So just a spire. So that's
I know golden dude. I like the golden dude.
The golden dude is awesome. I know. Very funny. So anyway, so here we have the actual application, the actual rendering. And this is exciting because we've been waiting for a long time for this. This means the process can get started. This has been put before planning and zoning. Next thing we're going to do is move on to that meeting, that is coming up the end of the month. Now, interestingly, of course, whenever you have a planning and zoning or a town council meeting in any of these towns, what do you get? You get letters from the church, from the stake, out to the members, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here is the letter that went out to multiple stakes. We're not just talking Fairview. It's quite the radius, right, of people. So this letter that I came across was sent out to the Frisco, Texas stake, neighboring area, but still in the McKinney, Texas temple districts. It's hard for people to understand. Why are you interested in this temple in this town? The district, fans out and covers multiple areas, multiple stakes. So it says, dear members of the McKinney Temple District, we're reaching out, hopefully for the last time. Yes, we hope, don't we? To ask for your support at the upcoming Fairview Planning and Zoning and Town Council meetings. The Planning and Zoning meeting will be held on Thursday, April 24th at 7 p.m. So this is right around the corner. This is very quick. And the town council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 29th at 6 p.m. This is all central time. The meetings will be held in the council chambers at Fairview Town Hall. This is what you were mentioning, RFM. This is just a regular size town hall city meeting kind of a thing. not the venue they rented before because they were expecting so many people. Please be aware that this is a smaller venue with limited seating, so attendees may need to stand or remain outside. The meeting is expected to last several hours. Feel free to come and go as your schedule allows. There's no need to stay for the entire time. Our main goal is to show support for the temple. We invite everyone to in support of the temple, to wear, wait for it, a blue shirt. Okay. All the other meetings, they were asked to wear a white shirt. And I've been thinking about this. Why now a blue shirt? That is what they wore in Lone Mountain when they showed up en masse at all of the meetings. Now it's Fairview residents' turn to wear the blue shirt. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Maybe it's good luck.
Do you think? Do you think it could be good luck? Or is it that wearing white shirts, a lot of people wore the white shirts that they had, which were Sunday shirts? Maybe it looked too much like a religious organization, coming into a town, throwing their weight around. I don't know. I have lots of different theories. Anyway, wear your blue shirt to both meetings. We also kindly ask that you refrain from making public comment during the proceedings, as our goal is to help the meeting run as smoothly and as efficiently as possible. We expect the individuals from Fairview will provide relevant remarks on our behalf. So people in the surrounding areas are not going to talk. The Fairviewidians, if that's what I can call them, are going to be the ones that speak up for the temple, the LDS members. And of course, members of Fairview United will also be making comments. This is why we're going to cover it, right? It's going to be very interesting. We expect that, even if you don't have an opportunity to speak, your presence alone will make a meaningful statement. I think it will. In a small venue with many, many, many blue shirts, I think that will make a meaningful statement. It'll be interesting.
It's very important to have as many people as you can possible at this meeting where the fix is already in.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, it'll be very interesting. So it goes on to say, if you can't be there, it's going to be live streamed. It'll be interesting to see if they live stream it into stake centers. They have done this before, which is very interesting. Sort of a church and statey kind of thing, isn't it? For the latest information, go to this website. So I thought that was very interesting. There's always a letter like that. There's always something, of course, as they have the right to do. And I wanted to remind everybody that we on the newscast, I don't know what color shirts we're going to wear, but we are going to be live streaming this, and we're going to put out more information about that. But
I'll wear my green Fairview shirt.
Yeah, we all have Fairview shirts. You can choose white shirts, blue shirts, red shirt, who knows, Dr. Seuss. Anyway, so this will be on the 24th, and we'll get some more information out about that, but put that on your calendar. And then very quickly afterwards, the town council. So a little more news just on 2 more temples, and then we'll move on to our next story. As you remember with Lone Mountain, that's already a done deal, right? It's over. It's been voted for. But in the meantime, after the temple was approved, there was a new ordinance that was put forward. I've talked about this on the newscast, that lighting can't go over 35 feet in this particular area. Now, that's very interesting because LDS temples tend to be lit to the hilt, right? Lit to Jesus. And, I've noticed, and I live around a lot of temples, it seems to be, I don't know if it's all night long, but it certainly seems to be late into the evening for sure. And then starting very early in the morning. So I happened to come across a review of the plan for the temple that the LDS Church submitted to the city of Las Vegas. So the LDS Church says, here's our plan. And of course, Las Vegas has to do its due diligence, go through every aspect of the plan, ask questions, ask for revisions, look at what the church is planning to do. So this was very interesting to me. I came across this part where it said, add note. Please add this note is what it said. Add a note that any light fixtures or light emitted even on buildings extending above 35 feet shall be turned off between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., excluding the FAA warning lights, beacons, or other warning lights. And then it gives the place in the plan where they're supposed to add it to sheets number LT, blah, blah, blah. So that tells me, because there was a lot of talk, there are loopholes. The church will get around that. There's no way they're going to put up with that. But, this is interesting to me because here it is on the plans. And the city has said, no, here it is. You better add a note. Don't forget, this is our new ordinance. Now, there might be some trouble with that. It's a new ordinance enacted since the temple was approved. And so I don't know, legally, RFM, what do you think?
They're going to say they were grandfathered in. Something about ex post facto laws
Yeah.
being unconstitutional.
Yeah, I kind of wonder about that. And I have heard some rumblings that there could be, I mean, perhaps the church will sue the town of Vegas over this lighting. I don't know. Hold on to your blue shirts, whatever we have no idea what shirts we're going to need. But I thought that was interesting. That's what's happening in Vegas.
I just wonder when they get that damn thing built, how many people are going to be going out there trying to gamble and find hookers?
They might end up there by accident, right? Attracted like a moth to the flame, to the light,
Yes.
and think they could find something like that. It's a
Is it my
possibility.
fault if their wings get burned?
Yeah, I don't know. I like my rendering there though, because that is what it would look like if they could only light it up to 35 feet. So
Those look like two
typically,
pictures that Carrie Shirts took with his new camera.
has he been sending those to you? Oh my God, they're so good though. We love you, Carrie. They're amazing. So yeah, and I'm sure as I've talked to other architects that have worked for the church before, that's not what they would do. They would just dim all lights, and turn all lights off below 35 feet. So anyway, but you can see the rendering of it. This is a monster. This is the biggest temple that we have been discussing. It is a monster. And interestingly, in talking to some of the residents there, I was kind of led to believe that the FAA approval is not exactly there yet. There are some stipulations about if a small aircraft has to fly higher over something, that's a problem. And also apparently a lot of rescue landings and things for Lone Mountain over there, right? They have to go in and rescue people that have tried to hike and have problems. So I'm not sure if that will be anything. If anyone in the chat or out there watching knows anything more about FAA regulations, but it certainly made me think of Heber, because that temple, that proposed temple, is right in the flight plan to the Heber airport. I mean, to the point where we thought Moroni might have to be holding some kind of guiding light. So anyway, we'll see. This is Lone Peak, Nevada, in the Las Vegas area. Our final temple is just brand new, absolutely brand new, just announced at conference.
Right.
Just last week. It's
Yes.
the Greenville, South Carolina temple. They already have a logo for it on some of their social media for the stake. They are extremely excited that this temple is coming. And they also have sent out a letter to the members in the area. And I've seen this letter sent out before to other places where a temple is announced. So I feel like this is sort of a form letter, perhaps, or a template that they send out.
It is so weird, isn't it? Go ahead, you read it.
It is really interesting, but I have seen this before. I think I posted it before. Was it Federal Way? I can't remember, but it was somewhere else where something was announced that I've seen this. So it says, Greenville, South Carolina stake, dear members of the stake. Last week, President Nelson announced that the House of the Lord, I keep forgetting to call it House of the Lord and not temple.
It's not just House of the Lord, it's the House of the Lord.
And
with
it's
a capital
capitalized.
T.
I told you, they in behind closed doors tell everybody that God actually lives there. Jesus
As if
lives
there's not
there.
over 100 of these suckers.
That's right. The House of the Lord will be built in Greenville. We have been instructed by the church communications department. This is why this, I believe, is a form letter. Do not get ahead of the prophet. Don't do that. The timing and specific location where the temple will be built has not yet been announced. It hasn't. It might be 2 years from now. We don't know. We have been asked to refrain from making announcements verbally or online that may reach Mormonish. Sorry, I just added that. That may that may go beyond that which we have been given. This is a proactive plan for avoiding unnecessary attacks and oppression. Now, that is very interesting to me. If I can just pause there, attacks and oppression.
It is actually opposition, but it is similar.
Oh, it is opposition. Sorry. I don't know why I said oppression. Probably because
Mormons,
I'm so lightheaded.
It's always oppression.
Well, I'm very lightheaded, having not eaten all day. If someone wants to DoorDash me some dinner right now, that would be incredible. So yes, it's opposition. But anyway, the attacks and opposition, it's interesting to me.
Rebecca?
Yes.
I'm looking over here in the live chat. A lot of people are volunteering. They just need your home address.
Oh dear. There you go. No, I was kidding. I'll be fine. It'll be great. So,
Tim Rathbone wants to
as
drop
she
by.
passes out on the couch, right? Actually, my dog has a little chewy pepperoni stick here that's kind of looking good. So if my camera turns off, that may be what I ended up doing. So anyway, I just want to comment on this attacks and opposition because, that's not why they want to keep it quiet. You see examples like in Cody. The city planner was busy changing codes all through the month of January of 2023 before the announcement came out, and everything moved so quickly. The town had a really hard time even understanding what was happening with the application and what it meant, and it went just instantly to town council or to planning and zoning. and was finalized so quickly. It's a stealth move. Look at what happened in Vegas. There were contributions made to council members from the church's law firm, whether it had anything to do with it or not. Codes were being changed prior to the announcement. So it's not a tax in opposition. I think it's the church getting all of its ducks in a row ahead of time before this announcement, because things move so quickly. You can't even imagine. I mean, even the mayors sometimes don't know what's happening, and all of a sudden there's an application, there's a rendering, there's a meeting, and then there's a planning and zoning. It is that fast. So anyway, but their point of view here is that attacks and opposition are going to happen. Let us follow and sustain the first presidency by sharing the good news of the temple announcement, while refraining from sharing anything beyond that which the prophet has shared. And the specifics are the location, the timing, etc. Just say we're happy we're getting a temple. Don't mention anything specific. And then it just goes on to talk more about how important the temple is. But I just thought that was very interesting that boom, like that, it goes out. I'd be curious if anyone else is in any of these other stakes where the other temples were announced, if they also received a letter like that. So I think that's the end of my temple news. If you guys have any comments on any parts of that, please go ahead, and then we can go on to our next story.
Yes, we wouldn't want to get ahead of the prophet on anything, would we?
No, we can't see around corners, so we can't even try.
Yes.
It is interesting. In fact, while you started that story, I came across a couple of stories that just broke in the last few hours. Actually, one comes out tomorrow.
Did you know this, Rebecca?
No, I say, damn it, because when I'm on the newscast, I can't be scouring the news. I mean,
That's
come on.
okay. You're usually
doing
first
something there. I know you're looking
I'm
at
only
something.
human.
Yep. I was originally going to cover another story that was an article put out by Jenny Smith in the Common Consent blog, but instead I added this. So I'm going to do this instead because it's temple news and I think it's much more important.
Great.
So I'll just note the evening report. This is actually dated April 15th, 2025. So this is
Australia.
tomorrow. It is because it's
Wow.
Australia. It's tomorrow. And it wasn't just one article, but it was two articles that were covering this.
This
And
really
what
is tomorrow's news today.
It really is. So the newscast is the first to Mormon news. I'll just note the main thing that this article is making, it's an Australian report on the two new temples that have been announced in Australia. They're mentioning that they're secretive, not meaning that the church was keeping these temples from being revealed that they were coming, but rather that things happen in there are secretive. And I'll just note the main crux of the article. Local opposition, the air of secrecy and exclusivity surrounding Mormon temples has resulted in a flood of negative attention from Australian media, other religious institutions, and society at large. News reports from as far back as the early 20th century sought to expose Mormon temple secrets. The first temple, built in Sydney in 1984, and we talked about this temple before and all the drama that went into that one. 1984 was widely protested by community groups and organizations. The building had to be modified by the church. That's what we were talking about it in regards to the steeple. Before it was eventually approved, a similar situation transpired in Brisbane in the early 2000s. And then you see the article there about the announcement. This was the 1982 report on the Sydney temple. I'll just note there, in other cities such as Adelaide and Melbourne, temples were not directly protested, but were still critiqued for their lavishness, with the average Australian temple costing around $8 million in the late 1990s, early 2000s. They've probably gone up since then. Given the cost of living crisis that Australia has and contention over a place of religion in contemporary Australia, the two proposed temples will likely also face criticism. And then the next paragraph in the article said, in terms of reputational management, the church's reputation in Australia has become even more complicated over the past 20 years, not least due to several controversies. In 2022 and 2023, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald reported that the church was allegedly abusing tax laws to the amount of hundreds of millions of dollars. This was addressed but not confirmed or denied in the November 2022 Senate estimates by Australian Tax Office Assistant Commissioner Jeremy Hirschhorn. After questioning by Green Senator David Schoberg, of course, these are all Australian politicians, accusations of tax evasion have also been made in New Zealand and the United States. Other controversies relate to the LGBTQIA plus discriminations, the church's influence in Australia global politics, and allegations resulting from the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse. So Australia seems pretty aware of all the same kind of troubles that the church is getting into over here. The last paragraph says the new Australian temples will be completed under a hall of critiques and accusations around church finances and other controversies. And while they might be briefly open to the public, their doors will just as quickly shut, adding more fuel to the speculation. And so I just wanted to bring this in and just note that the very issues we've been talking about with temples here in the United States, they're running into the same thing over in Australia and seem to, at least on some level, be getting in on the conversation around these early on. So I thought I would at least bring that to your attention.
Wow, that is so interesting because people say, why build so many temples? And one of the answers is it's one of the few places they can get very positive PR, at least for a while, the announcements. And this is not positive at all. Is this a turn where a temple is announced in an area and then all of these, that article hit point after point after point. That's very interesting. And if the church perceives that when they announce a temple and build a temple and have an open house for a temple, there's negative PR, will temple building turn around? I don't know.
Yeah. So I just wanted to finish that up with the temple news and just note to folks, the Mormon Newscast, where you get tomorrow's news today. And with that, Rebecca, I think the next story is yours as well.
You were reporting on stuff that hasn't even happened yet.
Hasn't even happened yet.
I have FOMO, or as someone else I know who mistakenly calls it FOBLO, fear of being left out, because I always break the temple news first. This is great, though. I love that people watch for it. No,
I had to steal tomorrow's news to do it, but I finally got you.
But you know what I love? I love that people watch for it now. Do you know what I mean? Temple watching was not really on anyone's radar 2 years ago. And I feel just everybody talking about it and understanding what it means and how it's important to be aware of. Everybody watches. It's great. So
you're bringing it back, Rebecca.
I'm bringing it back.
Hence, don't get ahead of the prophet.
Don't go around that corner. Don't do it. Okay. So here's something for you, RFM, the musical Carousel. Do you remember that? I'm sure you do. There's a song called June's Busting Out All Over. Do you remember that song? Yeah. So this
June
segment.
Is busting out all over.
Yep. Shirley Jones. All right. Poor Bill. Bill, you can just log off right now. RFM and I are just going to launch into a whole medley of everything from Carousel. I'll never walk alone.
Back when I was an observant Mormon, I would sing that song every June 1st in honor of Brigham Young's birthday.
Oh God. Okay, you've now ruined it for me. I'm never going to sing it again. Thank you. Anyway, the thought that's been going through my head is that Easter is bursting out all over. And we are going to talk about Mormon Easter madness. I know I mention it periodically here on the newscast, but now it's actually happening. And I have the receipts to show everybody what's going on. And I was on social media today, post-Mormon, and there were many, many people saying, what is happening? What is this? What are they doing? So we're going to talk about this. Of course, the first thing I have to bring up again is in the handbook of the church online. In the handbook, it says Latter-day Saints conduct Easter Sunday services, but do not follow the religious observance of Ash Wednesday, Lent, or Holy Week, which includes Palm Sunday. That's
okay. This is so important. This is from the church website. And it's still on the church website, even right now on April 14th, 2025.
I will say I put this slide up yesterday, but I'm always stunned because so many people post this, so many people talk about this, that it's still there. So as we're going to
testify to is it was on the church's website as recently as yesterday.
Yes. I looked, it's there next week as well.
Okay. Bill is now living in the future. That's right. We'll never be able to compete, our fans. So, all right. So, I kind of thought this was interesting. This was something from years ago where they said Mormons puzzling indifference to Easter. And this was published back in 2014, I think. I can't see because it's under the thing. But again, all of us know.
Is this in the Ensign or something?
No, it was on some kind of blog, LDS blog, but all of us know this is not what Easter was to any of us growing up, even a few years ago. And I've had people kind of come at me and say, why are you so anti-Easter? I'm like, I am not.
I'll tell you why I'm so against Easter, because it's what those freaking apostate Christian churches teach.
Right.
That's what they do, not the true church.
This is what I was going to say. I'm very happy for all my friends and relatives in the LDS Church that they're having these incredible celebrations. It looks like a lot of fun, and they are kind of like unleashed in their creativity and what they're doing and celebrating all of this. But I think it's just the fact that these, when I was growing up, were called false traditions of the apostasy. I mean, we did not do this, and not only just kind of ignored it, but we're flat out told this is apostasy. If you were to pick up a frond and wave it, you're in apostasy almost.
Absolutely.
So,
If this stuff was what apostate churches did when I joined the church, what is it when the LDS Church does it today?
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, and exactly, we've gone past that. We're in a restorationist church. We no longer practice those false traditions. So this person said Mormon indifference to Easter can puzzle pretty much everyone who stops to think about it. Mormons, post-Mormons, non-Mormons. Part of the reason for it is the influence of the New England Congregationalism and or the Puritans. We're going to blame it on the Puritans, on Joseph Smith and the religion he created. Joseph and his ancestors rejected a liturgical calendar. And this is exactly it. This is where his ideology, the soup that he was raised in, the religious soup, this is it. So it goes back to Puritan times where I've done a podcast on this. Christmas was outlawed. Christmas was illegal. Easter was illegal. All these celebrations were
Puritans were like the early J-dubs.
Exactly. It was seen as a Catholic tradition, the whore of the earth, and you just didn't go there. So we're talking back in the day, no makeup for women. If they found you with makeup, your face would be scrubbed. No colorful dresses. If you were doing unnecessary work on Sunday, you could be put in the stocks. I feel like that might be more restful than doing all that unnecessary work. But if a boy was caught throwing a football, you could be whipped if it was on Sunday. Again, this is, centuries ago. Christmas was banned. Soldiers were sent around the streets to remove food that was cooked for Christmas dinner. Decorations were not allowed. All other Christian holy days were disallowed, including Easter.
And at this time, it's more of a Protestant versus Catholic kind of thing.
Exactly. Can you read that, RFM, the public notice? I thought this was funny. And it applied to Easter too.
A public notice.
Public notice, yes.
The observation of Christmas having been deemed a sacrilege, the exchanging of gifts and greetings, dressing in fine clothing, feasting, and similar satanical practices are hereby forbidden. No exchanging gifts, Satan. Not today, Satan, not today. With the offender liable to a fine of 5 shillings.
That's right. So they took it very seriously. And this is the environment that Joseph Smith came out of. And that is why one theory is that we just didn't ever look at Easter. It was a Catholic tradition. It was a false tradition, and it was rooted in the apostasy. Yep. So just a few years ago, this is so recent, we start hearing things in conference. This is my favorite by Elder Stevenson, where he literally says, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you guys finally deciding to do this. Isn't this nice that you finally kind of decided?" Can you read that, RFM? It's too small for me. I just think this is a great quote.
From a couple of years ago, I observe a growing effort among Latter-day Saints toward a more Christ-centered Easter. This includes a greater and more thoughtful recognition of Palm Sunday and Good Friday as practiced by some of our Christian cousins. We might also adopt appropriate Christ-centered Easter traditions found in the cultures and practices of countries worldwide.
Right. So that's absurd. No LDS person would think of celebrating Palm Sunday unless they were told. So to couch it in this term, we're so happy to see you guys finally figuring this out. What's wrong with you? Why haven't you always done it? But I think one of the other keys as to why we're doing this, besides just the overall Christianization of the LDS Church, is in other countries. I think these traditions are deeply rooted in the culture of other countries. And as you have converts, you've got to, it's kind of like making Christmas on an existing pagan holiday. You've got to meld everything seamlessly so that everybody, can feel comfortable and be part of it. But
this is how a master gaslighter operates.
Exactly.
Just think about this. We're going to start pushing Palm Sunday to the rank and file at conference. And so here's how we do it. I observe a growing effort among Latter-day Saints to start celebrating,
Yeah, exactly. And nobody starts a growing effort in the church without some kind of confirmation that you can do that from above. You would never do that on your own. It does not work.
Especially when it's apostate.
It's apostate. Yep. False traditions. That's right. So
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. That's
right.
apostate.
So not only, oh, that's funny. Now that's going to be stuck in my head. So not only I think our older people, especially older than me, even just kind of their heads are spinning or they're really having to gaslight themselves. It's kind of awkward the way that the LDS Church is trying to do it. There's an awkwardness and people are noticing. It's almost like, remember when Brad Wilcox accused all other religions of simply playing church.
Yes.
I am now saying that the LDS Church, well-meaning and trying, they're playing Easter. So here's an example. If you remember, I reported on President Oaks's Easter address, where he said on Easter Sunday, when you enter the church and you see someone, you should say, "He is risen."
He is risen.
And then the person should appropriately respond, "He is risen." Okay, so that is not correct. It's indeed, he is risen. And so many people, who know about these traditions, these important.
Is that right?
Indeed is correct. Yes.
I didn't know that. Is this more in the Deep South or?
No. I'm gonna read you this really interesting opinion piece on this. These are like Eastern Orthodox Catholic traditions, right? So even in trying to get LDS people to do that, I had made that meme before, where the one woman, he is risen, and the other one who didn't get the memo goes, "What? What is happening?" It's just, it sounds so foreign because we've never before had these call-in responses in the church, right? We don't do that, except for in the temple. So anyway, this was a very interesting opinion piece about President Oaks asking us to do "He is risen." So this person says, President Dallin H. Oaks recently encouraged members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to start using the Easter greeting, "He is risen." Indeed, he is risen. Now, he left the indeed out. At first glance, that might seem like a harmless way to elevate the Easter season, but it's more complicated than it appears. This greeting isn't just a beautiful phrase. It's a sacred exchange rooted in the liturgical and theological traditions of Eastern Orthodox, Byzantine Catholic, and other historic Christian churches. It belongs to a larger rhythm of Holy Week and Pascha. See, I don't even know what that means. Good
Who
heavens.
wrote this?
This is a letter to the editor. It's really good. I'm going to tell you who wrote it at the end.
Okay.
It was in the Salt Lake Tribune. Shaped by apostolic succession, the Nicene Creed, and sacramental worship, things the LDS tradition has historically rejected, and rejected with force, and very loudly and very rudely. For Latter-day Saints to adopt this greeting without recognizing its origins or meaning comes across as spiritual and cultural overreach. It signals a willingness to borrow sacred language while continuing to distance itself from the theology and practices that give it meaning.
That's what the Mason said.
Church. Playing church. To put it in perspective, imagine if President Oaks had said, "Let's all begin saying Hail Mary, full of grace," during the Advent to focus on Christ's birth. Most Latter-day Saints would feel out of place, how out of place that would be to say that. The paschal greeting is no less meaningful or theologically loaded in its own tradition. And this is by a gentleman named Judd Case. And I thought that was very well stated. And that's how I feel about almost everything that they're trying. While it's exciting and new and wonderful and community building, there's just something a little off about it, and maybe as they continue to do it, it'll feel more natural. But anyway, any thoughts about that very quickly? And then I'll just move on.
Kim says? See what Kinder Kim says?
What?
Kinder Kim says, next thing you know, angels will have wings.
Yeah.
So you're going, ding, ding. Hey, look at me, everybody. I'm giving angels their wings.
Oh, I predict Ash Wednesday is going to be a thing within 2 or 3 years. I predict that.
Clarence.
Yeah. All right. If no more comments on that, I'm just going to show some pictures. But I don't know. Have you guys noticed it's just sort of off, this Eastering? Just off. It's just, I don't know. Just
Mormonism continues to spread itself out, but it remains, now it's not just a mile wide, it's like 10 miles wide, but still an inch deep.
Yep. I think that's
pointing the expression from Sterling McMurrin, I think.
Yep, exactly. And another person in a blog post said, according to the liturgical calendar, we've arrived at Palm Sunday. Yes, we have. That was yesterday. I am heartened that the LDS Church is more regularly and more publicly embracing these markers of Christianity. As a child growing up in the LDS Church, other Christians' use of this calendar was generally maligned as a sign of apostasy. Everybody's saying it. Being in community and conversation with the rest of Christianity is, I believe, a positive development for the LDS community, But then there's a footnote. Always check the footnotes. I think we learned that. We are accused of being footnotes, but that's because we read the footnotes. So the footnote says, I think there is an interesting conversation about whether the LDS Church might lose its unique identity if it swings too far into contemporary Christianity. We've talked about this with the use of crosses and Christian music, things like that. But given the emphasis placed on temples, the Book of Mormon, etc., I do not think that's an immediate challenge. And that's true. Although it's interesting, I have seen them trying to add upon the Christian traditions by adding the idea of temples or the Book of Mormon in a, kind of a trying to make maybe a square peg in a round hole. Anyway, interesting. So now we're just going to go through a bunch of pictures that I found.
I'm just offended. I'm offended by the person who wrote that article that they didn't put the full name of the Book of Mormon there.
Maybe
it's not the Book of Mormon, and it hasn't been for 40 years. It's the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ.
Maybe they had a word
short
count.
name when a long name will do.
They could have had a word count. We don't know. So Palm Sunday was yesterday. Now, I want anybody to tell me in the chat, had you even really heard of Palm Sunday growing up in the church? I guarantee
but Rebecca,
probably half of you hadn't.
Rebecca, I'm sorry, just to make sure that's clear. Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
I apologize.
No, go ahead. Take it away.
What I say is she says, I think there's an interesting conversation about whether the LDS Church might lose its unique identity if it swings too far into contemporary Christianity. But then she calls it the Book of Mormon and not the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ, which was an earlier attempt to swing Mormonism into the ambit of Christianity.
That is very true. Thank you for pointing out that irony there. Very interesting. That's right. So anticipation for Palm Sunday was through the roof. And here are some invitations from all over for musical programs to celebrate Palm Sunday. The biggest one was actually on Temple Square. Okay, did you ever think you would ever see a Palm Sunday celebration on Temple Square? And did you ever think you would see them pass out fronds? Now, I'm not saying like Hans and Franz. I'm saying frondiza, which is a leaf, like that. I told everybody to watch their house plants during this season because they're telling Mormons to bring fronds to church. And like Sunday morning, you're like, get the house plant, no, don't do that. Anyway, so this is the tabernacle, and this is a concert, and people are waving palm leaves.
That lady has a marijuana leaf.
Yeah, that's very possible. So anyway, the biggest concert was on Temple Square. Absolutely. People also had their own celebrations and would send after church, meet here. We're going to meet at the pavilion. We're going to have a Palm Sunday lunch. Again, very exciting. Community building, a brunch at a pavilion after church. When have you ever heard of that? Or an individual family decides to host a brunch and have a procession. I'm telling you, this is exciting times that they're living in, but it's very different. This person said, my stake sent out an email this morning about how they'll be bringing by palm fronds for us to take to the chapel for Palm Sunday. If you had read that 3 years ago, you would have thought that person was smoking crack.
You're absolutely right. Mormons are into shaking things. If it's not palm fronds, it's white handkerchiefs.
Well, I think this is more impactful than the Hallelujah shout. I absolutely do, because that's a big nothing.
That's why President Nelson's favorite song is "Shake Your Booty" by Casey and the Sunshine Band.
So here are some pictures that I just came across on social media. The first one is in my own neighborhood area, and a procession down the street of LDS members walking around with branches, and I'm assuming that they're singing, right?
They're singing Hosanna, Hey, Zanna, 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 Ho.
Yeah, again, playing Easter. Although this was really fun, I just wonder what the Christian neighbors are looking out the windows going, what are they doing, right? You can see that at the top there, a family had its own little celebration in their house with their kids. They reenacted the processional. So that's exciting. For those of you that don't know what Palm Sunday is, because you were raised Mormon, it represents the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem, and everybody adored him with the palm leaves. 3 days later, they said, kill him. But for that day, it was the palm leaves, right?
They switched out their palm leaves for daggers.
Exactly. Do you recognize the gentleman in the middle? That
Yes,
is our
that's
friend
Ganesh.
Ganesh. He attended a palm celebration. So anyway, wonderful community building, lots of fun things going on, but just so different. Here was one of the stranger ones that I thought kind of illustrated it. So this was on a Saturday, but again, it was an Easter celebration, and it says bounce houses, right? And a Christ-centered Easter program.
I don't see
So
how one can argue that a bounce house is not a violation of the Sabbath.
this is on Saturday. This is
Oh.
on Saturday, but I will say just
Then
like
just the Jewish Sabbath.
yeah, we're going to have a carnival over here. Then we're going to go over here and celebrate the most sacred man to ever be born in the world. And anyway, so I had to make this terrible sacrilegious Jesus in a bounce house. I'm very sorry. Anyway, it just kind of points out this idea of playing Easter, although really fun for everybody.
The amazing thing is that there's only been one perfect bouncer in a bounce house to ever live.
Oh, really? And who's that?
Well,
Are you talking
hello.
about Christ
why.
bouncing the temple? I guess maybe that's the metaphor. Christ is overturning the temples and bouncing the temple, tables bouncing the temple. I don't know.
He was perfect
But-
at everything. Hadn't you heard? He was the only perfect human being to ever live,
Yeah, I guess that's true.
which means he could do everything perfectly.
There it is. So if you are thinking of having your own Easter reenactment, and I've been on faithful social media sites where they're like, how would you
You might
like to do
want
this?
to hit the break when you come to the crucifixion part, though.
Yeah, well, it is dicey. And I did come across a post today on faithful social media where they're like, I want to do this. We do nativity scenes. I want my family to do an Easter scene. And so people were weighing in on some ideas, how they could recreate that in their house. And then somebody posted this on the thread and said, be aware, and this is from the handbook. It says, if the Savior is portrayed, it must be with reverence and dignity. Okay. Only men of wholesome personal character should be considered for the part. Okay, that's important. The person who portrays the Savior should not sing or dance. None of that.
I think they should be a tenor.
When speaking, he should only use direct quotations of scriptures spoken by the Savior, although, of course, there are no actual direct quotations. Well, I mean, we don't know his actual words.
I'm finding this more offensive than telling me what underwear to put on.
Well, no, here. Speaking of changing clothes, at the end of the performance, he should change immediately into regular clothes. Don't walk around dressed up like Jesus. Exactly. The Savior should not be portrayed by children in dramatization except in a nativity scene. So there are rules in the handbook for anybody that wanted to have their own processional.
Incredible. They are such meddlers.
It's interesting. So I have a few more pictures just to show you this fevered pitch of Easter. And once you're aware of it, you can't not be aware of it. So a lot of stakes are having walk through a life of Christ, kind of an open house. And it's a guided tour. Missionaries are there, and each room is set up as a certain element of what has happened during that Holy Week, right? This first one, it's in Cody, Wyoming. I don't know if they're going to get a lot of people to show up there in Cody, Wyoming. I'm just thinking they may not, but good on you for trying. So these are the invitations. Now, what really struck me as interesting is this one on the right where it says Easter activity, walk with Jesus through the stages of the cross. Have you heard anything similar to that?
Sure, the 7 points of the cross from the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it's actually called the Stations of the Cross, and it is an extremely holy event. It's
I was
not
giving
just,
a loose Latin interpretation.
yeah, it's not just walking into the stake center and looking at some. This is a serious thing. There are 4, and I'll show you here. Here's oh, you know what? This is a pageant. I don't know why this is here, but yeah, Mesa Easter pageant. That's a huge one they've had for a long time. Okay,
can you go back to that? That looks amazing. They've had this for a long time in Mesa.
They have. So I don't know why this slide ended up here. But anyway, I was going to show we have celebrated Easter before in Mesa. This has been something they've been very proud of for a long time. Yeah, it's a huge pageant. It's a huge Easter pageant. But if you attend one of these walk through the building kinds of things, this is what you're going to see. Here's one in El Paso, I think is that what it says. Yeah. And so you're going to see just scenes set up of Christ's final days. But it's just like the Stations of the Cross, right? Which is a very serious thing. There are 14 specific elements of this experience, and they take it very seriously. So, and I've had a lot of people reach out and say, do you think at these presentations that they're going to give, that at the end, they're going to try to tie in anything from the Book of Mormon or from 3rd Nephi? I mean, that would be apostasy to somebody who understood the tradition of the 14 stages of the cross. So I don't know if anyone happens to attend any of these. I'd be very curious to see if they did try to meld the two.
Well, the last room is going to be the Nephite appearance.
See, that's what I'm saying. Would they do that? I mean,
yeah.
please somebody tell me.
Why
if
would
they're
you
gonna
not do that? That's when you try and get them interested in your church, because you're the only ones who know that Jesus appeared to a
And
group
that's it.
of people descended from the Hebrews in the
Yep.
Americas about 30 AD.
Yep.
And he appeared to them, and they were called the Nephites. So we're the only ones who know that. So of course we would want them to know.
Yeah, we have special knowledge. It reminds me, there's a Christian statues of Christ at Thanksgiving Point, Lehigh, and you walk through this whole garden, and they're all scenes from the parables. Sorry, they're all, you wind your way, and there's Christ and all the parables, and then you get to the end, and it's the first vision. It's extremely jarring. It's really interesting, but it is in Utah. So anyway, a few more.
Maybe
pictures
it'll be
here.
the first vision. Maybe you're right in the last.
Yeah,
one.
I don't know. I don't have any idea. But anyway, so pageants. Yeah, anybody who attends, let me know. The Stations of the Cross. The other thing that can happen, somebody can just drop off "He is risen" cookies. I would not object to that. That would be fine.
What is he is risen cookie? What makes it?
I have no idea.
Cookie?
Just because you buy a box of cookies and you write "He is risen" on it. See, there you go. And it's a ministering gift. These are all real. These are all sent to me. And then on the right, this is a gift that was given out at church, like in Relief Society. And can you tell me 4 years ago if somebody would have handed out this gift at church? There's no way.
Oh,
There
no.
is no way.
Skin would have sizzled.
Yep. Skin would have sizzled. That's
People
exactly
would have hissed.
Yep. So, and then of course, I'm sure none of you can escape this. There are signs outside of every building inviting everybody to come in for the Easter service. There they are. I'm sure you have one right in your area. They're all different, but they say the same thing. And my question, of course, at the very end is, why have a restoration if you are now just returning to what existed before the restoration?
Because
really,
as the scriptures say, and thus we see that the course of the Lord is one eternal round.
And there it is. So anyway, keep an eye out for Easter, because I think Palm Sunday is only the beginning. It's going to hit a fevered pitch with the actual day, Easter, next Sunday. So,
Well, right, Good Friday. Coming up Friday, do you think the Mormons are going to come through on a Friday?
But, you know, I made that prediction after coming across a person who said he worked in the temple and had been read a letter that all temples would remain open through the night on Good Friday. I haven't heard any more about that. I thought they might announce it in conference, but who knows? There's still time to do that. But I don't know what they'll do on Good Friday.
People have to know if they're going to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
They do need to know. So I don't know. Maybe because I made the prediction, they shut it down. Yeah, I'm such a narcissist. But anyway, that's all I have on Easter. I think now we're back to Bill.
Wow.
Wasn't there a scripture in the New Testament that said something about for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity, come in the unity of faith. I'll just note, it looks like
the stature of the fullness of
Christ.
Yeah. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 14. If memory.
Of course, you have it all memorized.
I had it in front of me. I wasn't just pulling up my memory. Good job.
You have it in front of you?
I did. So
that is.
I know I was cheating. I'll just note, the LDS Church, as you guys just pointed out, is coming to a unity of the faith by coming back to the Protestants and the Catholics and making themselves more like them, when the whole gig was that we were supposed to help the world come to us.
I know.
It feels like they're giving up on this whole restoration thing.
If the mountain not come to Muhammad, Muhammad go to the mountain.
It's that rolling stone. And again, I just have to say, I'm not hating on Easter at all. I love all these celebrations. Everyone looks so happy, and especially the kids. They look so excited that something fun is actually happening at church or after church. I am totally on board with that, and I hope it gets bigger and better as it goes along.
But if you're doing any of that Jesus Easter stuff at home, you have got very certain guidelines from the church that you need to follow, okay?
Yeah. Talking about changing doctrine and theology, our second to last story, I think, for the night, is this story out of the Salt Lake Tribune. This is the most important LDS theologian of the 20th century in his anti-evolution fight over pre-Adamites. And this was David Noyce and Peggy Fletcher Stack.
And is this Matthew Bowman over here?
That is Matthew Bowman.
And he's wearing the same glasses.
Yeah, those are cool glasses. David and Peggy run the Mormon Land podcast from the Salt Lake Tribune as well. And they interviewed Matthew Bowman for this article. Matthew is a Howard W. Hunter Chair of Mormon Studies at Claremont Graduate University. I think that position used to be held by Patrick Mason, and before him was held by Richard Bushman.
Richard Bushman or Terrell?
Not Terrell Gibbons. It was Richard Bushman.
Okay.
And then he is the author of the book Joseph Fielding Smith, A Mormon Theologian. There's not too many of those in Mormon leadership anymore.
No, he was the Colossus.
He was. There's an intriguing, so in this article, the most important LDS theologian in the 20th century and his anti-evolution fight over preadamites, which was really just a small piece of the article. It delves into the life and influence of Joseph Fielding Smith. Smith's lineage is notable. His father, Joseph F. Smith, was the church's 6th president, and his grandfather, Hiram Smith, was martyred alongside Hiram's brother and founder of Mormonism. Of course, most people know this, Joseph Smith, but for the non-Mormon audience, which does make up a rather significant portion of our audiences on the content that we create. Serving as an apostle for 6 decades and as the church historian for nearly 5. Remember that 1832 First Vision account cut out with a penknife and stored away in the vault.
Hide.
Yeah. Joseph Fielding Smith eventually became the 10th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, he's perhaps best remembered for his extensive writings and firm theological positions. A few of his books there off to the right.
Hey, Bill, let's do a
Yes.
comparison, can we? So
Please.
I haven't read I read Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, which of course he edited.
I have that book, but it's orange on my shelf.
Yeah, that's because it's been there so long without being touched. Now, but you've read it, right?
I've read that.
Rebecca? Yay or nay?
Probably. Maybe someday, but no.
TPJS.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Essentials in Church History, yes. Bill?
Yes, I've read that.
Rebecca?
Nope. I was too
Doctrines of
busy reading
Salvation,
Jack
I've read that.
Whalen.
Bill?
Doctrines of Salvation is not, this one is just a one book, but it was 3 or 4 copies. It was 4
It's 3
yeah,
volumes.
Yep, and I have read that as well. There's lots of good stuff in there. Answers to Gospel Questions is another good one. That's a 3-book series, I believe.
It depends. I had it as a 5 or 6, but basically you can get it in a book. Like that says volume 3.
Yeah.
So I had it in these little paperbacks, these red paperbacks.
I've never seen or read Signs of the Times.
Neither have I.
And I know of, but I've not read Blood Atonement of the Church. Blood Atonement and the Church of Plural Marriage. Origin of Plural Marriage. But I have read The Way to Perfection.
Yeah, that was a very famous one.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he talked all about why it is that black people can't have the priesthood.
Yeah. So whatever it was, 5 out of 7.
You won't see that in a lot of footnotes, not in Mormon material.
No, not anymore. It's weird, right? He was a church historian, apostle, prophet, and anything unique he said has been discarded and is long gone. The things he taught really are as worthless as old cars and old comic books.
More worthless, I would hope, when it comes to the comic books. Thank you.
Oh boy. All right. A staunch conservative, Smith authored over 24 books and was known for his unwavering stances on various doctrinal issues. He frequently engaged in debates with fellow apostles and scholars, particularly on topics like evolution and age of the earth. His influence, again, this is all Matthew Bowman and the Salt Lake Tribune going over the life and the value that Joseph Fielding Smith added to Mormonism. His influence was so profound that scholar Matthew Bowman described him as the most important Latter-day Saint in the 20th century, most important Latter-day Saint theologian. I'll just note, I think this is something we are often, where it's appropriate, trying to give credit and to validate things on the believing side that really do deserve some sort of respect or validation for the facts. I'll just note, Smith's perspectives were shaped by personal experiences. As a child, he witnessed his parents flee to avoid prosecution during the polygamy crackdowns. And while that was illegal and the church was breaking the law, I can only imagine how that felt to a child, to a kid. Instilling in him a sense of the church being under siege. This background contributed to his defensive approach to theology and his commitment to preserving what he saw as the purity of church doctrine.
Can I interrupt here again,
Please.
Bill? That's what Matt Bowman is saying. There may be some truth to that, but I disagree strongly with the reason that I perceive he's saying it, which is a way to excuse Joseph Fielding Smith from cutting the 1832 account of the first vision out of Letter Book 1 in the 1830s and hiding it in his safe for about 3 decades before it was released, but only after its existence had come to the knowledge of the public, in spite of Joseph Fielding Smith's best attempts to keep it secret. So that's why I don't like that paragraph. And while there's some truth in it, and I'll give it some truth, that is nowhere near even being close to an excuse for what he did, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we can say simply that Joseph Fielding Smith and his son-in-law Bruce R. McConkie were very arrogant about what they believed to be true and what they thought they knew, and putting the hammer down on anyone who pushed back against them. Eugene England, Richard Pohl, as two examples. So I'll just note, for those interested in the intersections of faith and doctrine and personal history, Smith's life offers a compelling study of how personal experiences can shape theological perspectives, and again, to various degrees, as RFM is saying, and influence a religious community. I just want to note there is some degree of trauma that Joseph Fielding Smith experienced as a child, and there's no doubt that he had trauma in his family going back a generation or two, dealing with the martyrdom and the things that came after. So I'll just wrap up here with, I think, two more slides.
I read this one, Bill.
Yeah, I read this, and then I also read the article by Michael Ash, and I was going to recommend
Rebecca.
I'm not winning this at all.
I had never seen it, except they happen to have a copy at the Institute building at UT. So I grabbed it and I took it because, I know that evolution is true because Mormonism, and here's a book all about it.
Yeah, she went to eat those beef sticks, I think. So we'll just read the next slide. So Joseph Fielding Smith was one of the loudest voices in the 20th century LDS Church opposing evolution. He opposed a lot of things, and he was an advocate for a lot of things. Most of those today have been disavowed. That list would actually be quite big. He rejected any notion of pre-Adamite humans. This is, and I'll just summarize, I'll probably say it longer than this does, but this is basically the idea that Adam really was the first Homo sapien, and all of the other species of humanoid, Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthal and Homo erectus and all of those guys, those were something other than Adamites.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a separate species, no matter how similar they were, and
Mm-hmm.
they weren't evolutionarily connected to Adam and his posterity. So there's that. In his view, either God created Adam as the first man, or the whole plan of salvation fell apart. That black and white thinking put him at odds with other LDS leaders, including Apostle James E. Talmage and later John A. Widstow, who were more open to reconciling science and faith. I'll just note there on the right, you were mentioning RFM, the book, Joseph Fielding Smith, Man, His Origin and Destiny, because he was the most aggressive, loudest, and most adamant, and maybe sort of saw himself as the smartest guy in the room. He was the one who sort of pushed his views as the official views in Mormonism. If you go read the article written by Michael Ash, LDS apologist, The Mormon Myth of Evil Evolution, you'll learn that this issue is quite complex, that there were other leaders in the church, such as Talmage and Widstow. B.H. Roberts, I think, is another one who added some insight into this issue. But they were arguing that evolution could be acceptable under LDS theology, but it was Joseph Fielding Smith who was the loudest, and hence his views got, they resonated and were perpetuated within Mormonism's culture and in its official publications, lesson manuals, and other things, including Bruce R. McConkie reiterating this with the what's the name of the
Seven
talk?
Deadly Heresies.
Yes, where he talks about evolution being one of those. Widstow, let me go forward. Sorry. Despite the lack of official church doctrine on evolution, Smith's books, especially Man, His Origin and Destiny, heavily influenced the church's general attitude towards science for decades. I'll just note that's their view in the article when they talk about it being not exactly doctrine. I'll just note again, Bruce R. McConkie in the Seven Deadly Heresies is pretty adamant that it is. And that's my point, is that Joseph Fielding Smith and Bruce R. McConkie, reiterating his father-in-law, deemed these things to be true and imposed them in the church. And anybody who disagreed got letters written to them trying to silence them.
Bill, I was just going to mention that several times in that book, Joseph Fielding Smith harks to a point that I think he got from somewhere else, but which is his foundation, which is there is the fall and there is the atonement. It's kind of like apostasy and restoration. You can't have restoration without an apostasy, right? And that's the way he saw the fall and the atonement, which is that the atonement is meaningless without a fall, because what is there to atone? And therefore, he saw anything that denied the actuality of the fall of Adam and Eve as erasing the atonement at the same time. They're two ends of the stick that you got to pick up together or not at all, from his point of view.
Love it. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Smith was also a key figure behind BYU's rise as a research university, but with a catch. He pushed for academic growth and funding, and as most Mormon leaders do, trying to root out faculty he viewed as too liberal or doctrinally suspect. That tension expanding the university while policing belief created a culture where professors often felt pressure to align with conservative theological stances if they wanted to keep their jobs. Evolution, again, was one of the main flashpoints. And I think this is the last one. As for who's more conservative or controversial between Joseph Fielding Smith and Bruce R. McConkie, the article pointed out with Matthew Bowman taking the lead, it's kind of a spiritual baton passing. Smith laid the groundwork and McConkie followed in his footsteps, marrying Smith's daughter, quoting him constantly, and doubling down in the book Mormon Doctrine. But if Smith was the ideological architect, McConkie was the firebrand builder. McConkie might come off as more extreme because of how forcefully and systemically he codified, I like that word, those views, but the raw theology often traced back to Smith. So in short, Smith was the theologian and McConkie was the enforcer. So who was more controversial? I'll leave it up to each of you to let us know in the chat who you think was more controversial, Bruce R. McConkie or Joseph Fielding Smith. And with that, I turn the time back over to you, Rebecca.
Yes, I was not getting up to eat puppy chow. I had to let my dogs out and then in and then out again. So I'm sure most of you with dogs can relate, or even cats. So
now we know who let the dogs out.
Now we know who let the dogs out. Who? Yeah, it was me. That's true. So no, I have to say all those books were in my parents' bookcase, of course. And what you just described shaped and informed them. And I was raised under all of that, like a lot of us my age were. And so it's so funny to see all of that disavowed now. I mean, subtly put out to pasture. It's just interesting. So, all right. I snagged one of the legal scenarios going on right now, RFM, away from you. I'm sorry. But I had a different kind of spin on this, and this won't be too long. If you can play this is from day one, opening statements. Lori Daybell is in trial in Arizona for the murder of her, I think, fourth husband. I'm sure most of you have been following the story, and Lori Vallow's brother shot him in an altercation, supposedly in a condo. But of course, everybody feels that Lori Daybell is the puppet master behind all of it, trying to get her husband out of the way.
She had nothing to do with that, Rebecca, and she can prove it by the fact that she was present when the shots were fired, but she left and took the two kids to school.
Yeah, she did. She took them to school or to McDonald's or something. Yeah,
and
she is serving as her own lawyer, which is why this is very interesting. You can see this live streaming. It's absolutely fascinating.
Because this is what everybody does when they hear shots fired in their house, whether they see a body fall or just hear it go on the floor. You take the kids to school. Nothing's going to get in the way of the education of those kids.
Yeah.
That's what a good mom, Lori Daybell, is.
Yep, it's a trigger response. Anyway, I would encourage anybody to watch it because it's pretty interesting. But this part from the opening statements by the prosecutors really kind of got me thinking about some things. So this is very brief. It's just a minute, but this is the prosecution opening statement, part of it.
Is this the Lauren Matthias? Did you guys say that true crime podcast?
I think this clip might have come off of True Crime, and she's covering it so well. If you really want to know what's going on, go over to True Crime.
Hidden True Crime.
I think it is. Yeah, I found it at lots of different places, and I just grabbed one. So yeah, hopefully that's okay to use this for. Just
it's great. I just want to give her a nod.
Oh yeah,
she's been on the podcast.
She's amazing.
Before, and
she's incredible.
Covers all of this Mormon.
Yep, Hidden True Crime, everybody. Hidden True Crime. Go over there.
So what about Nephi? Well, Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, and Alex Cox all believed that those who disagreed with them were dark, possessed by evil spirits, sometimes called Z's or zombies. Sometimes they had names for these evil spirits like Ned. Lori, Chad, and Alex used religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a story of Nephi, a prophet, who was directed by the Holy Spirit to kill Laban, to obtain brass plates and secure the long-term prosperity of Nephi's descendants. Lori used this religion and the story of Nephi as justification to kill Charles Vallow. just like Nephi killed Laban. On July 9th of 2019, Lori
I think that's where it
Vallow
should end.
invoked Nephi.
Right there. My little timestamp didn't work. Yeah, I just thought that was so interesting that here we have introduced to everybody in the courtroom, reporters, newscasters, the story of Nephi. And
This has got to be the biggest story, maybe of all time, certainly of this year. You got millions and millions of people who have watched it live or watched it on repeat, and they get introduced to Mormonism and the Book of Mormon by hearing about the story of Nephi. Were you going to talk about how she keeps coming back on the theme throughout her opening statement?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to be a little brief, but yeah, I just thought it was so fascinating that this was brought up, because to me it is one of the more dangerous elements of Mormonism, and I think a lot of atrocities, some extreme and some less, have been enacted because of this. It's better that we do something really hard and difficult right now for the sake of every. I mean, it's like the cartoon, right, on polygamy. We can do hard things right now for, the good later. So if you go to
Lafferty's used this story as well.
Lafferty's, yep, everybody used it. Yeah, it's almost like the One Mighty and Strong, another dangerous story. But so my next slide, she does keep going back to this.
Oh yeah, be like Nephi.
Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking, who doesn't know this song as a child? I mean, primary pianist here, the Lord commanded Nephi to go and get the plates right from the wicked Laban. It's a very exciting story with actions, and you're basically teaching kids, because they're going to hear the rest of the story when they read the scriptures. Sometimes you got to do something really hard and really awful, like murder somebody. But if it's what God wants you to do and it's the right thing to do, you got to do it.
And he wouldn't give you your property, and you knew it was your property, even though it was kind of his property, but you'd asked him for it and he wouldn't give it to you. So you were justified.
You're justified. It justifies quite a bit. And I've seen it used in a lot of different ways. So she goes on to say, Lori, Chad, and Alex, and again, Alex is the brother of Lori, who was kind of their guy that did the evil stuff for him when they weren't doing it on their own. Lori, Chad, and Alex used religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a story of Nephi, a prophet who was directed by the Holy Spirit to kill Laban to obtain the brass plates. This is what she keeps going back to. Lori used this religion and the story of Nephi as justification to kill Charles Vallow, just like Nephi killed Laban. And so they have texts that are from Lori and I think Chad talking to Alex and say, got to be like Nephi. Yes. Time to be like Nephi. And if you say that to anyone in the church of any age, they know what that means. That means you got to do something pretty unpleasant, but you've got to do it because there's a really important spiritual and religious reason that you have to do it. Again, a very dangerous story. So I thought that was really interesting that was brought up. And then and I hope it gets more traction. I hope more people dig into the story of Nephi and Laban, because you don't make this stuff up. Well, you do make this stuff up. You know what I'm saying? So, but it made me think, RFM, the reason I wanted to cover it, because on your wonderful conference coverage that I think probably took years off of your life, one of the things that you mentioned and we had talked about before is, will they say anything about the idea of children, especially children, but really anybody being possessed by a demon or being a dark spirit,
anybody who's vulnerable.
Anybody who is vulnerable, because we now have two very public cases, where in one case, Lori and Chad, they believe their kids had turned into zombies and in order to save their soul, had to kill their mortal body. Same kind of concept with Jodi Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie, right? Torturing the children, deprivation to, beat the demon out of them. So these are these are LDS cases. Will anything be said at conference about this? Like, your kids aren't possessed, guys. They're not.
Right. They're not. So stop thinking it. By the way, I have to modify what I said. Vulnerable people. Mm-hmm. Charles wasn't vulnerable. He was a grown-ass adult.
Yeah.
Everybody's in danger.
Everyone is.
From Mormons who are believing this stuff.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so I thought about how you were looking for that, and that was not said anywhere. And it makes you think, if there are these two very public cases, how many other places, just in homes, is somebody saying, oh, you've got the devil in you, or, oh, Satan made you do it, and just that idea, just that kind of othering of a child or a person, that there's some evil in them, it's just completely wrong.
And not only did they not say that, as you observed, Rebecca, they went the other way and had different talks, at least two of them, that doubled down on Satan being a real being who really is out to get you.
Yep, and that is my next slide right here, because I almost couldn't believe it. And I know maybe just nobody really picked up on it, but to me, I thought it really did double down on that message. And this is Sister, how do you pronounce her name? I'm sorry. I'm like Cardin and all those guys. I don't know who's in that.
I can't remember, and I apologize. It's like Rutabaga, Sister Rutabaga.
Yeah, Bill.
Aruga?
Anyway, lovely, lovely woman. And she gave a whole talk, which I will say she spoke more, I think, naturally a little bit and kind of to people. I mean, it was a little different than the cadence of conference, but she did kind of look right at the camera and she said, and you need to hear this. So I'll say these words out loud. You are not the voice in your head. Okay, that's good advice. Or the mistakes you may have made. You need to say out loud too. Tell Satan, not today. Put him behind you. Again, not today, Satan. That just perpetuates that idea that your children, your vulnerable adults, your spouse, somebody may be under the influence of Satan. And then what are you supposed to do? What measures will you take to save your loved one from these influences of Satan? And I know that permeates the church. When my oldest son, so this would have been, 25 years ago, was like a 4-year-old. He was in a primary class and he came home and he was very quiet and he was very disturbed, and he went right to his room. And I said, what happened? How was church today? And he had a much older teacher, like somebody 80s, probably should not still be teaching, primary. And he said, well, Sister so-and-so told me that the devil's in my heart. It's always in my heart. And I need to do everything I can to, overcome it or stop it from being in my heart. He was terrified. I was so angry. Of course, at that point, I didn't do anything about it. But the idea that you tell a little child, you've got something evil inside you, you need to, so anyway, I don't know. Thoughts on that, RFM and Bill?
I feel like children should just know that they have something evil inside of them. Yeah. They don't have to be told that.
Good. Okay, good.
But here's the thing about what she says. When she says, you are not the voice in your head, I think I know what she's meaning. But my question is, and the question she's begging is, okay, so if I'm not the voice in my head, who am I? Or am I supposed to be the voice that you put in my head?
Yep, all those elements exist. Any thoughts on that, Bill? And then I have one more conference wrap-up slide and we are done.
I think all religious dogma is dangerous, and I think you take mythological stories and impose them as the truth, and when those stories contain irrational ways of acting, people will cling to those as the way to do things and will justify it in whatever way they need to because it's their religious belief, and Mormonism isn't the only religion doing that.
Well put, Bill. As Alf used to say, it's worse than dogma. It's dogmanure.
Yeah.
You can't beat an Alf quote. That just brings it all home. So, okay, one final slide from conference. I thought this was great. So over on Faithful social media, the day after conference, somebody asked the question to the Faithful audience, and to paraphrase, she said, I invited non-member neighbors over to conference. I was so excited because conference is amazing. And I invited them over, and maybe the kids were being loud or the dog was this and that. She said, but I was shocked at their response. And I will read this one part. She said, the challenge came as we discussed some of what we watched. So she's talking to the neighbors who are non-members and saying, what'd you think? What'd you think? And the responses from our friends was the general conference is nice, but they were overwhelmed by how boring it was. They commented on the slow speech, using lots of words to convey very little, not having very much punch to their talk.
Amen.
They're not Amen. Exactly. They're not active, but are definitely used to a more evangelical service.
Or how about just having a message?
Exactly. And they also said a lack of emotion from the speakers. So the person was like, it didn't go as planned, but kind of like they're wrong, right, guys? I mean, they didn't get it, right? It's not really like that. So I just thought that was funny, overwhelmed by the sheer boredom of it. I just thought that was great.
It's a perfect description of general conference. And why would you invite neighbors over to watch that unless you wanted to make them into enemies?
And my parents were parents that did that. They would always invite the neighbors over and have the little film strip, right? Beep, Man's Search for Happiness. I'd be like, please, no, not that family. I won't be able to show my face at school. I was a little Exmo, even though I didn't know it when I was a kid, but they did that all the time. And I also had to note that all the pictures you find having to do with the more faithful side of conference, look how engaged all those people are on the right-hand side there, sitting up, taking notes. I think the reality is more what you see on the bottom left, right?
I don't think those people on the right knew that there was someone taking a picture of them even.
Oh, no, they don't look posed or staged at all. Nope. So anyway, if any of you happen to invite your friends over to conference, let us know what they said. So, let us know what they thought of Elder Anderson's talk and some of the others. That's all I have. I'm done.
Wow.
All right. Well, there is another episode of the Mormon Newscast, Radio Free Mormon. Rebecca Biblioteca, thank you very much. Any final words from you two?
Just if you want to talk about what's coming up for the rest of the week, we have a bunch of stuff. You guys especially have a lot of stuff.
What do you have
for the reminder, Rebecca?
Yeah. What do you have going on tomorrow night, Rebecca?
I have an awesome episode with Ganesh that piggybacks off. It was kind of sparked by your Colby Townsend episode, which continues to make waves. And Ganesh is going to be talking about anti-Catholicism and how it got into the Book of Mormon and the influence of the Whitmers. And that kind of piggybacks onto what you guys were talking about, because he also believes that the Whitmers were a huge influence on kind of pushing Adam Clark, right? Which, as you pointed out, and Colby, of course, first found its way into the Book of Mormon. So this is Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. The amazing Ganesh, who's about to publish his book. This is one little chapter on anti-Catholicism. I think you'll find it fascinating.
He's really quite a brilliant fellow.
He's incredible, and he waves a palm frond like no other.
There you go. Mr. RFM, what do you have going for us on Wednesday? For Mormonism?
Wednesday. Yeah, now that I'm done with this and getting ready for this show, now I get to hit the ground running and try and start getting ready for Wednesday's show. I have some things lined up, and I have the most important single thing lined up, and that most important single thing is Dan Vogel. Dan Vogel's going to be on the show, and the working title is the wacky world of polygamy deniers, because what we want to show you is that they don't have a freaking leg to stand on. They shouldn't be invited to any table where there are actual historians or academics sitting at it, because there are fundamental problems. And we're going to go over 3 or 4 of them. They are the fundamental problems that if you understand them, you will realize that the earth is not flat. It's actually round. Okay. It's going to be that kind of exercise. And Dan has been doing a series of videos where he's been pointing out certain things that they talk about, which are just like, you're going, what universe did I just step into? Because obviously the laws of reason don't apply here. We'll go over those so that everybody can understand. Everybody can have a chance to understand why it is that at least I say that I'm not interested in really interacting with these people, because they're, I don't want to say nuts. That's rude. Crazy is equally as pejorative. Let's just say they're insane, okay? And let it go at that. So that's what we'll be doing Wednesday. Should be fun.
Awesome.
And we're also going to bring Michelle Stone on as a surprise for Dan Vogel halfway through.
I love it. I can't wait to see that. And then Friday, of course, we'll have Mormonism After Dark at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we'll just see you guys again back here next Monday for the next episode of the Mormon Newscast. Thank you to both of you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And so long, and have a great night.
Gordon B. Hinckley here. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. And remember, Mormon was a good word before it was a bad one. # Hinckley was a better prophet.